My husband has been telling our daughter she's not his for 15 years, and I just found out what he's been whispering to her. I've been with my husband Martin for 18 years. We got married young, I was only 21, and I was already 3 months pregnant with our daughter Judy. His family never approved of me. They thought I trapped him, that I got pregnant on purpose to lock down their son who was supposed to go to law school. His mother told me at our wedding that she hoped I was worth the sacrifice. I ignored her because Martin chose me. Judy is 17 now, and she is everything to me. From the moment she was born, I knew she was special. She came out with a full head of dark hair just like mine and the biggest brown eyes. As she grew up, she became the most thoughtful child. She would pick flowers from our backyard and leave them on my nightstand. She has always been tuned into other people's emotions in a way that amazes me. But Judy has also always been sensitive in ways that worried me. In elementary school, she would come home and cry for hours if another kid said something mean. I remember when she was 9, she asked me why Daddy didn't hug her like other dads hugged their kids. I made excuses for him. I told her Daddy just wasn't good at showing feelings, that he loved her in his own way. Martin was never cruel to Judy, not in ways I could point to. He just wasn't present. He would come home from work and barely acknowledge her. He never asked about her day, never showed up to her school plays. When she tried to show him something she made, he would give one-word answers and go back to his phone. I confronted him many times. He always said he was tired, that he was providing for this family, that I was overreacting. So I became both parents. I went to every event, helped with every assignment, stayed up late talking about her problems. I thought my love could fill the gap. But things changed when Judy hit middle school. She became withdrawn. She would stare at herself in the mirror for long periods, and I once caught her crying while looking at old family photos. When I asked what was wrong, she would shake her head. Her grades slipped. She stopped seeing friends. She started wearing baggy clothes. I got her into therapy when she was 14 after I found her scratching her arms with a paperclip. The therapist diagnosed depression and anxiety. Medication helped, but something was still off. She flinched whenever Martin entered a room. She went silent at dinner if he spoke. I thought she resented him for being distant. I had no idea what was actually happening. Last week I was cleaning Judy's room while she was at school. I wasn't snooping, just putting away laundry, but I found a journal hidden under her mattress. I know I shouldn't have read it, but something told me I needed to. The first pages were normal teenage things. Then I reached an entry from 3 years ago, right before everything fell apart. She wrote about a night when I was visiting my sister. She wrote about Daddy coming into her room and sitting on her bed. She wrote what he whispered in the dark, things he had apparently been saying since she was little. Things about how she wasn't really his daughter, how I had cheated and she was the result, how he was stuck raising another man's child and it disgusted him, how she ruined his entire life, how she should be grateful he didn't leave, how if she ever told me, he would make sure I found out what a burden she really was, and I would leave her too. There were pages and pages of these conversations, years of them. Secret moments when I wasn't home, when he would remind her she was unwanted, a mistake, lucky anyone kept her. My daughter is biologically his. I have never been with anyone else. Martin knows this, and he spent 15 years breaking my child from the inside while I thought he was just distant. I kept reading. Some nights he told her she ruined his dreams. Other nights he said I would have been happier without her. He told her no one could ever love someone so broken. My baby wrote that she believed him. She wrote that she wished she had never been born so Daddy could have the life he wanted. She wrote that maybe everyone would be better off. I sat on her floor and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. 15 years of psychological torture under my roof, and I never knew. The journal is in my closet. Martin doesn't know I found it. Judy doesn't know I read it. Tonight, Martin comes home from his business trip. He thinks everything is normal. He has no idea what kind of monster I've been sleeping next to for 18 years. And he has no idea what I'm planning when he walks through that door. I check the clock on the kitchen wall every 30 seconds while I wait for Judy to get home from the school. My hands won't stop shaking. The journal sits on the counter in front of me, and I keep staring at it like it might disappear if I look away. When I finally hear her key in the lock, my stomach drops. She walks in with her backpack slung over one shoulder, and the moment she sees me sitting there with the journal, all the color drains from her face. She freezes in the doorway. I watch her eyes go from my face to the journal and back again. She opens her mouth, but no sound comes out. I stand up and walk toward her, and she starts backing up against the door. Her hands come up like she's trying to protect herself from something. I tell her we need to talk, and my voice cracks on the last word. She shakes her head fast, over and over. Then the words start pouring out of her in this panicked rush. She's so sorry. She didn't mean for me to find it. Please don't be mad. She should have told me sooner. She's sorry she kept secrets. She knows I'm going to be angry. She's apologizing so fast she's tripping over her words and tears are already streaming down her face. I reach for her and she flinches. Actually flinches away from me. That breaks something in my chest. I pull her into my arms anyway and she goes stiff at first. I hold her tight and tell her this is not her fault. None of this is her fault. Her father is the monster here, not her. Never her. She makes this sound like all the air got knocked out of her lungs. Then she's sobbing into my shoulder, her whole body shaking. I keep saying it over and over. Not your fault. Not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. We end up on the kitchen floor with our backs against the cabinets. Judy can't seem to stop crying long enough to catch her breath. I keep one arm around her shoulders and let her cry until she's hiccuping. When she finally starts talking, the words come out broken and messy. She tells me about the nights when I worked late shifts at the hospital. How Martin would come into her room after she was supposed to be asleep. He would sit on the edge of her bed in the dark and talk in this low voice. She tells me he started when she was really little, maybe 5 or 6. She didn't understand at first what he meant when he said she wasn't really his. She thought maybe she was adopted. But then he explained that I had cheated on him and she was the result. He told her she ruined his whole life. He was supposed to go to law school and become someone important. Instead, he got stuck with a wife who trapped him and a kid who wasn't even his. Judy's voice gets smaller as she talks. She tells me about the times he came in when she was doing homework. He would stand in her doorway and remind her that she destroyed his dreams. That every time he looked at her, he saw his wasted potential. She tells me he said I would have been so much happier without her, that she was a burden on everyone who had to deal with her. The constant reminders that she should be grateful he stayed, that most men would have left. She tells me about the threats. How he said if she ever told me what he was saying, he would make sure I found out what a mistake she really was. That I would realize he was right, and I would leave her too. She was terrified I would choose him over her if I knew the truth. Her voice breaks when she tells me she believed him. She thought she really did ruin everything. She thought maybe everyone would be better off if she just disappeared. I'm trying so hard not to fall apart while she's talking. I need to be strong for her right now. But hearing her say these things out loud, hearing the pain in her voice, it's killing me. This is my baby. My daughter who used to pick flowers for me and leave them on my nightstand. And her own father spent 15 years convincing her she was worthless. She's sobbing so hard now she can barely breathe. Her whole body is shaking against mine. I realize she's been carrying this alone for most of her life. All those years I thought Martin was just distant and emotionally unavailable. All those times I made excuses for him. He was actively destroying our daughter's mental health and I had no idea. I help Judy up off the floor and tell her to go pack a bag. She looks at me with red, swollen eyes and asks where we're going. I tell her we're leaving right now and we're never coming back to this house. She nods and heads upstairs while I grab my phone. My hands are still shaking so bad I almost drop it twice. I call Lyra, and the second she answers, everything comes spilling out in this rushed, angry whisper. I'm trying to keep my voice down so Judy doesn't hear me falling apart. I tell Lyra about the journal, about what Martin's been doing to Judy for 15 years, about the lies and the psychological torture and the suicide thoughts. Lyra is silent for a moment. Then she starts cursing. She tells me to pack our stuff right now and come to her house immediately. We can stay as long as we need. She'll make up the guest room. Just get Judy out of there before Martin gets home. I can hear Judy moving around upstairs, opening drawers and closing them. I go to my bedroom and pull our suitcases out of the closet. I throw clothes in without even looking at what I'm grabbing. Underwear, shirts, pants, whatever my hands touch goes in the bag. I grab our toothbrushes from the bathroom and our phone chargers from the nightstands. I go back to the closet and pull out the journal from where I hid it this morning. Judy appears in the doorway with her backpack and a duffel bag. Her face is blotchy and her eyes are still wet. She asks if we're really leaving Daddy. I tell her yes, we're really leaving him. She nods and doesn't say anything else. We carry our bags down the stairs and out to the car. I throw everything in the trunk and we get in. Judy buckles her seatbelt and stares straight ahead. I back out of the driveway and force myself not to look at the house. We're out the door and gone in less than 30 minutes from when I first told Judy I found the journal. The drive to Lyra's house takes 40 minutes, and Judy doesn't say a word the whole time. She just stares out the window with her arms wrapped around herself. I keep glancing over at her, but I don't know what to say. What do you say to your child after finding out her father has been emotionally abusing her for over a decade? Lyra is waiting on her front porch when we pull up. She comes down the steps and opens Judy's door before I even turn off the car. She pulls Judy into a hug, and Judy starts crying again. Lyra looks at me over Judy's shoulder, and her eyes are full of tears too. We get the bags inside, and Lyra shows Judy to the guest room. She tells Judy to take a hot shower and try to rest, that we'll order dinner later. Judy nods and closes the door behind her. The second that door clicks shut, I fall apart. Lyra catches me before my knees give out and we sink down onto her couch. I sob into her shoulder about how I failed to protect my child, how I slept next to that man for 18 years and never knew he was destroying Judy from the inside, how I made excuses for him when Judy asked why Daddy didn't hug her, how I told her he just wasn't good at showing feelings when the truth was he was telling her she wasn't his, and she ruined his life. Lyra holds me and lets me cry. She tells me I couldn't have known. that Martin hid it deliberately. But the guilt is crushing me. I'm Judy's mother. I'm supposed to protect her. And I let a monster live in our house and torture my daughter for 15 years. After I calm down enough to breathe normally, I pull out my phone. I need to text Martin before he gets home and finds us gone. My hands are shaking again as I type. I tell him Judy and I are staying at Lyra's for a few days because we need some space. I hit send and put the phone face down on the coffee table. It buzzes less than a minute later. I pick it up and read his response. He wants to know what's going on and what he did wrong this time. The message is short and annoyed, like I'm being dramatic about nothing. There's no concern in his words, no actual question about whether Judy and I are okay. Just confusion and irritation that we left. I stare at that message and feel my blood start to boil. What did he do wrong this time? Like I'm always making up problems. Like he's the victim here. This man spent 15 years telling our daughter she wasn't his and that she ruined his life. He threatened her into silence. He made her want to die. And he has the nerve to act confused about what he did wrong. I want to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I turn it off and put it in my pocket. Lyra asks if I'm okay, and I tell her no. I'm not okay. I don't think I'll ever be okay again. She squeezes my hand and tells me we'll figure this out. She'll help me. Judy will be safe here. I nod, but I don't really believe it yet. I don't know how to make Judy safe from the damage that's already been done. That night, I can't sleep. I'm lying in Lyra's spare bedroom staring at the ceiling while Judy sleeps in the guest room down the hall. I keep thinking about all the entries I read in that journal. About how Judy wrote that she wished she'd never been born so Martin could have the life he wanted. About how she thought maybe everyone would be better off without her. I get up and go to my suitcase. I pull out the journal and sit on the floor with my back against the bed. I open it to a section I didn't read before. The entries are from 2 years ago, right after Judy turned 15. She wrote about contemplating different ways to die. She wrote about standing on the edge of the parking garage at the school and wondering if jumping would hurt. She wrote about counting pills in the medicine cabinet and calculating how many it would take. She wrote about feeling like a burden on everyone around her. On me, on her teachers, on her friends. She wrote that maybe if she disappeared, Martin would finally be happy. Maybe I would finally have the life I deserved without having to take care of a broken kid. I have to put the journal down because my hands are shaking, so hard I can't hold it. I run to the bathroom and throw up in the toilet. My daughter wanted to kill herself because of what her father told her. She thought I would be better off without her. She thought she was a burden to me when she's the best thing that ever happened to me. I sit on the bathroom floor and cry until there's nothing left. The next morning, I'm exhausted, but I can't stay in bed anymore. Judy is still sleeping when I come downstairs. Lyra is making coffee in the kitchen, and she takes one look at my face and asks what happened. I tell her I read more of the journal last night, about the suicide plans and the self-hatred. Lyra's face goes white. She asks if Judy is in immediate danger, and I tell her I don't know. That's what scares me the most. I don't know how bad things are in Judy's head right now. I pull out my phone and find the number for Judy's therapist. Her name is Cassandra, and Judy has been seeing her for 3 years. I call the office the second they open and tell the receptionist I need an emergency session. She asks what the emergency is, and I tell her I discovered my husband has been psychologically abusing our daughter for 15 years, and Judy has documented suicide plans in her journal. The receptionist puts me on hold. When she comes back, she tells me Cassandra can see us at 11 this morning. I thank her and hang up. Judy comes downstairs a few minutes later looking like she didn't sleep at all. Her eyes are puffy and red. I tell her we have an appointment with Cassandra in 2 hours, and she nods without asking why. We eat breakfast in silence and then drive to the therapist's office. I bring the journal with me. Cassandra meets us in the waiting room and her face is serious. She brings us both back to her office and closes the door. I hand her the journal and explain what I found. That Martin has been telling Judy she's not his daughter and blaming her for ruining his life since she was 5 years old. That he threatened her into keeping it secret. That Judy has been carrying this alone for over a decade. Cassandra opens the journal and starts reading. I watch her face change as she goes through the entries. Her professional calm cracks, and I can see the horror in her eyes. She reads for maybe 10 minutes and then closes the journal carefully. She looks at Judy and asks if everything written here is true. Judy nods and starts crying again. Cassandra tells us this is severe psychological abuse. That what Martin did constitutes emotional child abuse and parental alienation. That Judy is at serious risk, and we need to take immediate action to protect her. Cassandra spends the next hour explaining things I've never heard of before. She tells me that what Martin did is called parental alienation and emotional abuse. That telling a child repeatedly that they're unwanted and threatening them with abandonment causes deep trauma that can last a lifetime. That children who experience this kind of abuse often develop depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts exactly like Judy has. She explains that Judy's brain has been developing under constant stress and fear for most of her life. That the self-harm and the suicide planning are direct results of Martin's systematic destruction of her self-worth. She tells me Judy needs intensive therapy and possibly medication adjustments. But most importantly, Judy needs to be completely separated from her abuser. Cassandra looks at me very seriously and tells me I need to consult with a family lawyer immediately about protecting Judy. That Martin should not have unsupervised access to her ever again. That what he did is serious enough that a court would likely restrict his custody rights. I ask her if she's sure, if this is really that bad. She tells me she's been a therapist for 20 years, and this is one of the worst cases of psychological abuse she's seen. That most people don't understand how damaging emotional abuse can be, but it can be just as harmful as physical abuse. She says Judy is strong for surviving this long, but she's at a critical point. We need to act fast to keep her safe. I tell her I don't know any family lawyers, and she says her husband is one. His name is Xavier, and he specializes in custody cases involving abuse. She can get me an appointment with him this afternoon if I want. I look at Judy, and she's staring at her hands in her lap. I tell Cassandra yes, I want that appointment. We leave Cassandra's office at noon, and I drive Judy back to Lyra's house. I tell her I have to go meet with a lawyer this afternoon, and ask if she'll be okay with Lyra for a few hours. She nods and goes upstairs to the guest room without saying anything. Lyra tells me she'll keep an eye on Judy and to take as long as I need. The lawyer's office is downtown in a tall building with glass windows. I take the elevator to the 8th floor and find Xavier's office at the end of the hall. The receptionist tells me to have a seat and that he'll be with me in a moment. I sit in the waiting room clutching Judy's journal and trying not to fall apart again. A man in his 40s with kind eyes and gray at his temples comes out and introduces himself as Xavier. He shakes my hand and brings me back to his office. It's lined with law books and has a big desk with 2 chairs in front of it. He gestures for me to sit and asks me to tell him what's going on. I hand him the journal and explain everything. About Martin telling Judy she's not his daughter for 15 years. About the threats and the psychological torture. About Judy's depression and self-harm and suicide plans. About how I just found out yesterday, and we left the house immediately. Xavier opens the journal and starts reading. He takes notes on a legal pad while he reads, writing down specific entries and dates. His expression gets more grim with every page. When he finally looks up, he tells me this is one of the worst cases of psychological abuse he's seen in his career. I ask him what we can do, and he tells me we need to file for divorce and emergency custody immediately. That the journal is powerful evidence of Martin's abuse. That no judge will grant him unsupervised access to Judy after reading these entries. He says we can file the paperwork today and get an emergency custody hearing scheduled within a few days. He explains that I'll get temporary full custody, and Martin will likely be restricted to supervised visitation only. He asks if I'm ready to move forward with this, and I tell him yes. I'm done protecting Martin. I'm done making excuses. My only job now is protecting Judy. Xavier slides a retainer agreement across the desk, and I sign it right there in his office. I leave Xavier's office with the signed paperwork in my bag and drive back to Lyra's house. Judy is upstairs in the guest room when I get there, and Lyra tells me she's been quiet all afternoon. I knock on the door, and Judy says to come in. She's sitting on the bed with her knees pulled up to her chest, staring at the wall. I sit down next to her and tell her we need to go back to the house to get more of our things. Her face goes pale, and she asks if Martin will be there. I check my phone and see that Martin texted me an hour ago saying he's stuck in meetings until 5. It's only 2:30 now. I tell Judy we'll be in and out before he gets home. She nods but doesn't look convinced. We drive to the house in silence. I park in the driveway and we both sit there for a minute, neither of us wanting to go inside. Finally, I open my door and Judy follows me up the walkway. The key feels wrong in my hand when I unlock the front door. Everything looks the same as it did yesterday morning when this was still our home. The couch where Martin sat every night scrolling his phone. The kitchen table where Judy stopped talking during meals. The hallway leading to her bedroom where he destroyed her piece by piece. I tell Judy to pack whatever she wants from her room while I get our important papers. She goes upstairs and I head to the home office. I pull open the filing cabinet and grab our birth certificates, social security cards, passports, insurance documents. I find our bank statements and make copies of everything on the printer. My hands shake while I sort through years of paperwork, pulling anything that might be needed for the divorce. I hear Judy moving around upstairs and the sound of drawers opening and closing. I go to our bedroom and pack more clothes for both of us. I grab Judy's baby book from the closet and photo albums from when she was little. I'm in the garage looking for boxes when I hear a car door slam. My stomach drops. I check my phone and it's only 3:15. Martin isn't supposed to be home yet. I hear the front door open and Martin's voice calling my name. I run inside and find him standing in the living room staring at the boxes I've stacked by the door. He looks at me and asks what's going on. His face is calm, but his eyes are hard. I tell him I'm getting some of our things. He asks why, and I say we need space. He takes a step toward me and says we talked about this yesterday, that I'm overreacting. I tell him I know everything. I know about what he's been telling Judy. I know about the lies he whispered to her for 15 years. His face goes completely blank for a second, like someone hit pause on him. Then he blinks and his expression shifts to confusion. He asks what I'm talking about. I tell him I found the journal. I read every word Judy wrote about the nights he came into her room. Every word about him telling her she wasn't his daughter. Every word about him saying she ruined his life. Martin's jaw tightens and he says I'm taking things out of context. That Judy misunderstood. That kids exaggerate when they're upset. I feel rage rising up from my chest and I walk past him to grab the journal from my bag. I throw it at him and it hits his chest before falling to the floor. I tell him to read it. Read his daughter's words about how his abuse made her want to die. He picks up the journal but doesn't open it. He looks at me and says Judy is being dramatic. That I'm turning nothing into something. That he was just being honest with her about his feelings. I stare at him and realize he doesn't feel bad at all. He knows exactly what he did and he doesn't care. I hear footsteps on the stairs and Judy appears with her backpack. She sees Martin holding the journal and freezes. Martin looks at her and starts to say something, but I step between them. I tell Judy to take the boxes to the car. She grabs 2 boxes and runs outside. Martin tries to walk past me toward the door, but I block him. He tells me I'm being crazy and that we need to talk about this like adults. I tell him there's nothing to talk about. I'm taking Judy, and we're leaving. He reaches for my arm and I scream at him to never touch me again. He jerks his hand back, shocked. I've never yelled at him like that in 18 years. I grab the last box and tell him my lawyer will be in contact. I walk out the door and don't look back. Martin is standing in the doorway watching me load the car, but I don't care. Judy is already in the passenger seat with her seatbelt on. I get in and back out of the driveway. Martin is still standing there when I turn the corner. We drive back to Lyra's house and I carry the boxes inside while Judy goes straight upstairs. Lyra asks if everything is okay, and I tell her Martin came home early. That he tried to say Judy misunderstood everything. That he showed no remorse at all. Lyra hugs me and says she's glad we got out of there. That evening I call Xavier and tell him what happened. He says we need to file the emergency custody papers tonight. He asks me to email him photos of specific journal entries, and I sit at Lyra's kitchen table taking pictures of page after page. Judy's handwriting gets messier in the entries where she's crying. Some pages have tear stains that smudge the ink. I send Xavier 20 photos and he calls me back an hour later. He says he's filing everything tonight and that the court will schedule an emergency hearing within a few days. He's including excerpts from the journal and a statement from Cassandra about the damage Martin caused. I ask him if this will really work, and he tells me no judge will let Martin have unsupervised access to Judy after reading these entries. I go upstairs and knock on Judy's door. She's lying on the bed staring at the ceiling. I sit down and tell her we're divorcing her father, that she'll never have to see him alone again. Judy starts crying and asks if this is her fault for writing in the journal. I pull her into my arms and tell her the only person at fault is Martin, that she was brave for documenting what happened, that writing it down probably saved her life. She cries into my shoulder and asks if I hate her for not telling me sooner. I tell her I could never hate her, that Martin threatened her and manipulated her, and none of this is her responsibility. We sit there until she falls asleep. My phone starts buzzing around 9 that night. Martin is calling over and over. I let it go to voicemail. Then the texts start coming. First he apologizes and says we need to talk. Then he says I'm destroying our family over a misunderstanding. Then he says he was just being honest with Judy about his feelings and that parents are allowed to have complicated emotions. I screenshot every message and send them to Xavier. Then I block Martin's number. The next morning, Dylan Torres calls from Judy's school. He says Judy's teachers noticed she seems upset and wanted to check in. I tell him there's a family situation and that we're handling it, but I'd appreciate if he could keep an eye on Judy. He's really understanding and says Judy can come to his office anytime she needs to talk. He asks if there's anything else the school should know, and I tell him we're in the process of getting a custody order. He says he'll make sure Judy feels supported. 3 days later, we go to the emergency custody hearing. Xavier meets us at the courthouse and walks us through what's going to happen. Judy doesn't have to testify at this hearing. The judge will review the documents and make a decision about temporary custody. We sit in the courtroom and Martin walks in with his lawyer. He doesn't look at us. Judge Walker comes in and everyone stands. She's a woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes. She tells everyone to sit and starts reading through the file. The courtroom is silent except for pages turning. Martin's lawyer stands up and starts talking. His name is on the paperwork as someone named after a male figure. He says Martin was just venting frustration and that he never physically harmed Judy. That parents sometimes say things they don't mean when they're stressed. That this is a private family matter being blown out of proportion. Judge Walker cuts him off and asks if he read the journal entries. He says he did, but that teenage girls often dramatize their feelings. Judge Walker's expression changes to something cold. She looks at Martin and asks if he told his daughter she wasn't his biological child. Martin says he may have said something like that once or twice when he was upset, but it wasn't meant seriously. Judge Walker reads a journal entry out loud about Martin telling Judy she ruined his life and that he wished she'd never been born. She asks Martin if he said those words. Martin says he doesn't remember exactly, but that Judy was always very sensitive. Judge Walker closes the file and says she's granting me temporary full custody immediately. Martin's face goes red. Judge Walker says she's ordering supervised visitation only and appointing a child therapist to evaluate Judy. She orders Martin to undergo his own evaluation and take parenting classes. She looks directly at Martin and tells him his behavior constitutes emotional abuse. That telling a child she's unwanted and threatening her with abandonment causes serious psychological harm. Martin opens his mouth, but Judge Walker says the hearing is over. We walk out of the courthouse and Judy is crying, but she's also smiling. She asks if she really doesn't have to see him alone, and I tell her never again unless she chooses to. 2 days after the hearing, my phone rings at 7 in the morning. I'm making breakfast for Judy when I see Martin's mother's name on the screen. My stomach twists, but I answer because I know this conversation has to happen eventually. Her voice comes through sharp and cold before I can even say hello. She demands to know why I'm keeping their granddaughter away from them. She says Judy is their family too, and I have no right to cut them off. I tell her she needs to ask her son what he's been telling Judy for 15 years. There's silence on the other end, and then she starts talking over me. She insists Martin would never do anything to hurt Judy. She says I must be making this up to win the divorce and get more money. She tells me I've always been manipulative, and now I'm using Judy as a weapon. I hang up without responding because there's nothing I can say that will make her believe her son is capable of what he did. Judy looks at me from the kitchen table and asks if that was her grandmother. I nod, and she goes back to her cereal without another word. The next afternoon, I drive to an office building across town to meet Maya Cleveland. Xavier set up the appointment and explained that her evaluation will determine what custody arrangement the court orders permanently. The waiting room has children's toys in one corner and magazines on a coffee table. Maya comes out to greet me exactly on time. She's probably in her 40s with dark hair pulled back and kind eyes behind wire glasses. She shakes my hand and leads me to her office. The walls are covered with certificates and child psychology books line the shelves. She sits across from me and explains that she'll be evaluating Judy over the next several weeks. She says her report will be crucial in determining what kind of contact Martin can have with Judy. She asks me to walk through Judy's mental health history starting from when she was young. I tell her about the depression diagnosis at 14 and the anxiety medication. I describe finding Judy scratching her arms with a paperclip. Maya takes notes and asks specific questions about when Judy's symptoms started getting worse. I realize as I'm talking that everything got bad right around the time Judy turned 12. Maya asks about Martin's behavior over the years, and I describe his distance and the way Judy would flinch when he entered rooms. She asks if I ever suspected abuse, and I have to admit I thought he was just emotionally unavailable. The guilt sits heavy in my chest as I explain how I made excuses for him. Maya tells me that what Martin did is called covert abuse because it happens in private where no one else can see. She says parents who do this are often very careful to maintain a normal appearance to the outside world. The session lasts almost 2 hours, and by the end I feel wrung out. Maya schedules Judy's first appointment for 2 days later. Judy is quiet on the drive to Maya's office for her first session. She picks at her fingernails and stares out the window. I ask if she's okay, and she shrugs. I tell her Maya is really nice and just wants to help, but Judy doesn't look convinced. I wait in the lobby while they meet. 45 minutes later, Judy comes out looking exhausted. Her eyes are red like she's been crying, but there's something different in her expression. We get in the car and she tells me it felt good to have someone believe her. She says Maya didn't question whether she misunderstood her father's words, or if maybe she was being too sensitive. She just listened and said that what Martin did was wrong. Judy's voice cracks when she talks, and I reach over to squeeze her hand. Maya schedules weekly sessions to build a complete picture of what Judy experienced. Judy asks if she has to keep talking about it every week, and I tell her it's important for the court case. She nods and says she'll do whatever it takes to make sure she doesn't have to see him alone. 3 days later, Xavier calls me while I'm at work. I step outside to take the call. He tells me he's been hearing things from other lawyers in town. Martin has been telling people I'm mentally unstable. He's claiming I found the journal and twisted everything to make him look bad. He's saying I'm making up stories to turn Judy against him and win the divorce. Xavier's voice is calm, but firm when he tells me this is a common tactic in custody cases. He says Martin is trying to paint himself as the victim of a vindictive wife. Xavier advises me to document everything Martin does from now on. Every text message and every attempt to contact us needs to be saved. He tells me not to engage with Martin's smear campaign. He says responding will only make me look unstable like Martin is claiming. I ask what happens if people believe Martin's version, and Xavier reminds me we have the journal and the professional evaluations. He says the evidence speaks for itself. I hang up feeling sick because I know Martin's family, and probably some of our mutual friends are hearing his lies and believing them. That weekend, I'm at Lyra's house helping Judy with homework when someone starts pounding on the front door. Judy's face goes white. Lyra looks through the peephole and mouths that it's Martin. My heart starts racing. Lyra pulls out her phone and calls the police while Martin keeps banging and shouting. He's yelling that he has a right to see his daughter. He says I'm poisoning Judy against him and keeping her from her own father. Lyra yells through the door that the police are coming and he needs to leave. The banging stops, but I can hear him pacing on the porch. Judy is shaking next to me on the couch. 5 minutes later, a police car pulls up. The officer talks to Martin on the front lawn, and I watch through the window. The officer is showing Martin some paperwork and pointing at his car. Martin's face is red and he's gesturing angrily, but eventually he gets in his car. The officer comes to the door and explains that Martin was violating the custody order by trying to make contact outside of supervised visitation. He says they've documented the incident, and if Martin tries again, he could be arrested. As the officer walks back to his car, Martin drives past slowly. He stares at Lyra's house, and I pull Judy away from the window. 2 weeks later, the supervised visitation is scheduled at a family services center downtown. Judy begs me not to make her go. She's crying and saying she can't be in a room with him. I explain that Xavier says refusing could hurt our case. I tell her a supervisor will be there the whole time and can end the visit if Martin says anything wrong. Judy asks what if the supervisor doesn't believe her if Martin acts normal. I promise her that she can ask to leave anytime she wants. The drive to the center is silent except for Judy sniffling. The building is plain brick with a small parking lot. Inside, there's a reception desk and several rooms with windows. A woman introduces herself as the supervisor and explains the rules. She says she'll be in the room the entire time taking notes. She tells Judy she can end the visit whenever she wants. Martin is already waiting in one of the rooms. He stands up when Judy walks in, but she sits as far from him as possible. The supervisor closes the door, and I'm left in the waiting area staring at my phone. 20 minutes later, Judy comes out. Her face is pale, and she walks straight past me toward the exit. The supervisor catches up to us in the parking lot. She tells me Martin spent the whole visit trying to convince Judy that I misunderstood the journal. He kept saying he never meant to hurt her and that I was twisting his words. Judy wouldn't talk to him. She just sat there staring at the wall until she finally asked to leave. The supervisor says she'll include this in her report to the court. Judy gets in the car and puts her seatbelt on without looking at me. I ask if she's okay, and she says she never wants to go back. I tell her she won't have to. Over the next few weeks, Judy continues her sessions with Maya. One afternoon, Maya calls and asks me to come in without Judy. I sit in her office and she opens a thick folder of notes. She tells me Judy has been experiencing symptoms of complex PTSD from years of psychological abuse. She explains that Judy's self-harm and depression are direct results of Martin's systematic destruction of her self-worth. Maya says the pattern of abuse was deliberate and targeted. Martin knew exactly what he was doing when he told Judy she wasn't wanted. The formal diagnosis will strengthen our custody case significantly. Maya says she'll recommend in her report that Martin have no unsupervised contact with Judy until he completes extensive therapy. She adds that even then, Judy should have the choice whether to see him. I ask if Judy will be okay eventually, and Maya says with continued therapy and distance from Martin, she has a good chance of healing. But the damage Martin caused will take years to fully process. A week later, Xavier calls with news about Martin's psychological evaluation. The evaluator found narcissistic personality traits and a complete lack of insight into how his behavior affected Judy. The report says Martin minimizes his actions and blames Judy for being too sensitive. He told the evaluator that Judy always overreacted to things and that he was just being honest about his feelings. The evaluator noted that Martin shows no remorse and doesn't believe he did anything wrong. Xavier says this report is devastating for Martin's custody case. No judge will grant unsupervised visitation to a parent who can't acknowledge the harm they caused. I feel a rush of relief mixed with anger. Martin still doesn't think he did anything wrong. After everything he put Judy through, he's convinced he's the victim. 3 weeks after we left, I'm walking to my car after work when I notice Martin's car parked across the street. He's just sitting there watching the building. My hands start shaking as I get in my car and lock the doors. He follows me for 6 blocks before turning off. The next day, he shows up at the grocery store where I'm shopping. He walks past my cart and says he just wants to talk. I ignore him and go to find a store employee. 2 days later, he's outside Judy's school when I pick her up. Judy sees him and starts crying. That evening, I call Xavier and tell him what's been happening. He says we need to file for a restraining order immediately. Martin's behavior is escalating and it's not safe. The next morning, we go to the courthouse and file the paperwork. I have to describe each incident where Martin followed me or showed up somewhere he knew I'd be. The judge reviews the documents along with the custody order Martin already violated. She grants a temporary restraining order keeping Martin 500 feet away from me and Judy. The order is good for 2 weeks until we can have a full hearing. Xavier says this order combined with everything else makes it almost certain Martin will lose his custody case completely. 2 days after Xavier files the restraining order paperwork, Judy has her weekly therapy session with Cassandra. I wait in the lobby like always, flipping through a magazine without actually reading it. When the door opens 45 minutes later, Judy walks out looking different somehow. Her shoulders are back instead of hunched forward. Her jaw is set in a way I haven't seen before. Cassandra follows her out and asks if she can speak with me for a moment. Judy nods and sits down to wait. Cassandra takes me into her office and closes the door. She tells me Judy had a breakthrough today. Instead of crying about what Martin did to her, Judy spent most of the session talking about how angry she is. She's mad that he stole years of her childhood. She's mad that he made her hate herself. She's mad that she believed his lies for so long. Cassandra says this anger is healthy and actually a really important part of the healing process. Judy needs to feel that rage before she can move past it. I ask if the anger will make things harder for Judy, and Cassandra shakes her head. She explains that Judy has been turning all that anger inward for years, which is why she hurt herself. Now she's finally directing it at the person who actually deserves it. We talk for a few more minutes about what to expect as Judy works through this new phase. Cassandra warns me that Judy might seem more irritable or short-tempered for a while. She might want to talk about Martin's abuse more openly instead of avoiding the subject. All of this is normal and good. 3 days later, Xavier calls me at work. Martin's lawyer sent over a settlement proposal. I leave my desk and go outside to take the call in private. Xavier reads me the terms. Martin is willing to agree to minimal custody in exchange for lower child support payments. The proposal says Martin admits no wrongdoing, but recognizes that supervised visitation might be in Judy's best interest at this time. The child support amount he's offering is about half of what Xavier said we should expect, based on Martin's income. Xavier tells me he strongly advises rejecting this offer. Martin needs to be held accountable for what he did, not allowed to pretend he's just being reasonable. More importantly, Judy deserves the financial support that Martin is legally required to provide. The amount he's offering wouldn't even cover her therapy costs, let alone her other expenses. I tell Xavier to reject it immediately. I don't want Martin to think for 1 second that he can buy his way out of facing consequences. Xavier says he'll send a response today making it clear we're not interested in any settlement that doesn't include full accountability and appropriate financial support. That weekend, I start looking at apartments online. Judy and I can't stay with Lyra forever, even though she keeps saying we're welcome as long as we need. I want Judy to have her own space, a place that feels safe and permanent. I scroll through listings during my lunch breaks and in the evenings after Judy goes to bed. Most places are either too expensive or in neighborhoods that don't feel secure enough. On Sunday afternoon, I show Judy a few options that seem promising. She looks at them on my laptop, zooming in on the photos. When she gets to the third listing, she asks if we can find a place with good locks. She wants windows that don't face the street. The way she says it makes my chest hurt. My daughter is scared of her own father finding her. I tell her we'll find the safest place possible and that security is my top priority. She nods and goes back to looking at the listings. I add security features to my search criteria and start over. 2 weeks later, we drive to look at an apartment in a building about 20 minutes from Lyra's house. The building has a doorman at the front entrance and security cameras in all the common areas. The apartment itself is small, just 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, but it's clean and the rent is manageable. Judy walks through both bedrooms twice. She picks the one at the back of the apartment, the one farthest from the front door. She goes to the window and looks at the locks. She asks if we can put extra locks on it even though we're on the 4th floor. I tell her absolutely, we can put as many locks as she wants. The landlord says we can move in at the beginning of next month if we want it. I fill out the application right there in the apartment. That evening, I go to the hardware store and buy the best window locks they have. I also buy a complete security system that monitors doors and windows. The salesperson helps me pick out equipment that will send alerts to my phone if anything is opened or moved. I spend more than I planned, but I don't care. Judy needs to feel safe. The same week we find the apartment, Xavier calls with news about Martin's parents. They hired their own lawyer and filed a petition for grandparent visitation rights. Their petition claims I'm alienating Judy from her father's entire family, and that she needs to maintain relationships with her grandparents. Xavier sounds annoyed when he reads me parts of their filing. They're painting themselves as concerned grandparents who just want to see their granddaughter. They make no mention of the abuse or why Judy might not want contact with anyone connected to Martin. Xavier tells me this is a common tactic in abuse cases. When the abusive parent loses access, other family members try to get their own access to maintain control or gather information. He says it's unlikely to succeed given all the documented abuse and Judy's clear statements about not wanting contact. The court generally won't force a teenager to have visits with people she doesn't want to see, especially when there's evidence of a toxic family dynamic. I ask what we need to do, and Xavier says he'll file a response opposing the petition. He'll include statements from Cassandra and Maya about how contact with Martin's family could harm Judy's recovery. A week later, Maya calls to tell me she's finished her evaluation. She spent 6 weeks meeting with Judy, reviewing all the therapy records and analyzing the journal entries. Her report is ready to submit to the court. She asks if I want to come in to discuss her findings before she files it. I take an afternoon off work and drive to her office. Maya has a thick folder on her desk with Judy's name on it. She opens it and walks me through her conclusions. She's recommending that Martin have only supervised visitation until he completes extensive therapy and can demonstrate real understanding of the harm he caused. She says unsupervised contact would be harmful to Judy's mental health and recovery right now. Her report describes in detail how Martin's abuse caused Judy's depression and anxiety. She uses words like systematic and deliberate to describe his behavior. She writes that Martin showed a pattern of targeting Judy's self-worth and sense of belonging. She notes that Judy still struggles with believing she deserves to exist, a direct result of years of being told she ruined her father's life. Maya tells me her report is very strong and should carry significant weight with the judge. She's seen hundreds of custody cases, and this is one of the clearest examples of psychological abuse she's encountered. The next week, Judy has an appointment with her psychiatrist to discuss her medications. She's been on the same combination for almost 2 years, but it hasn't been working as well lately. The psychiatrist suggests trying a new medication, along with adjusting the dosage of her current one. Judy agrees to try it. Within 2 weeks, I notice changes. Judy is sleeping through the night instead of waking up multiple times. She's eating regular meals without me having to remind her. Most importantly, she hasn't scratched or hurt herself since we left Martin. One morning, I find her in the bathroom looking at her arms in the mirror. The old scars are fading to thin white lines. She sees me watching and tells me she doesn't feel the need to do it anymore. She says her head is quieter now, like someone turned down the volume on all the bad thoughts. At her next session, Cassandra tells me removing Judy from Martin's influence is allowing her brain to heal from the constant stress. Judy's nervous system was stuck in survival mode for years, always waiting for the next cruel comment. Now that she's safe, her body can finally relax. 6 weeks after I found the journal, we have the final custody hearing. I put on my best dress and Judy wears the outfit we picked out together. Xavier meets us at the courthouse and goes over what to expect. He tells Judy she might be asked to speak to the judge privately if the judge wants to hear directly from her. Judy nods, but I can see her hands shaking. We go through security and take the elevator to the family court floor. Martin is already there with his lawyer, sitting on a bench in the hallway. He looks at us but doesn't say anything. Judy moves closer to me and looks at the floor. We sit on a different bench far away from him until the bailiff calls us in. Judge Walker is the same judge who granted the restraining order. She has all the evaluations and therapy records stacked on her desk. The hearing takes almost 3 hours. Xavier presents Maya's evaluation, Cassandra's treatment records, and excerpts from Judy's journal. Martin's lawyer tries to argue that Martin has completed anger management classes and is willing to do family therapy. Judge Walker asks Martin directly if he understands why his behavior was harmful. Martin gives a long answer about how he was under stress and made mistakes but never intended to hurt anyone. The judge's expression doesn't change, but she writes several notes. After both sides finish presenting, Judge Walker says she's ready to rule. She looks at Martin and tells him his actions constituted severe psychological abuse of his daughter. She says he systematically destroyed Judy's sense of self-worth and caused lasting trauma. She terminates his parental rights to unsupervised custody and orders supervised visitation only. She adds that the situation can be reviewed in 2 years if Martin completes extensive therapy and can demonstrate genuine understanding of the harm he caused. Judge Walker then addresses the financial issues. She orders Martin to pay substantial child support based on his actual income, not the reduced amount his lawyer proposed. She also orders him to cover all of Judy's therapy costs, including any future treatment she needs. The judge looks directly at Martin and tells him he's fortunate not to be facing criminal charges for what he did. She says psychological abuse of a child is serious and the court takes it very seriously. Martin's face turns bright red, but he doesn't say anything. His lawyer puts a hand on his arm like he's worried Martin might speak. Xavier squeezes my hand under the table. Before we leave, Judge Walker addresses the grandparents' visitation petition. She says she's reviewed their filing and finds no merit in their claims. She states that they've shown no understanding of the abuse and have actively tried to undermine Judy's recovery by supporting Martin and blaming me. She denies their petition for regular visitation. She says they're allowed supervised visits only if Judy agrees to see them, which Judy has already stated she doesn't want. The judge tells them through their lawyer that Judy's well-being comes before their desire for contact. We walk out of the courtroom and Judy starts crying in the hallway. Xavier gives us privacy while we stand by the windows. Judy tells me she was so scared the judge wouldn't believe her or would make her see Martin alone. I hold her and promise her that's never going to happen. We leave through a side exit so we don't have to walk past Martin again. 3 months felt like both forever and no time at all. Xavier called me on a Tuesday morning to tell me the divorce was finalized. I sat in my car outside the grocery store and stared at my phone after we hung up. The house was mine. Judy was mine. Martin kept his retirement accounts and we split the savings down the middle. Xavier said it was one of the fastest divorce resolutions he'd ever seen in an abuse case. I drove home and told Judy, who was eating cereal at the kitchen counter. She put down her spoon and asked if it was really over. I told her yes. She cried, but not the way she used to cry. These tears felt different, lighter somehow. We moved into our new apartment 2 weeks later. It was smaller than the house, but it felt safer. Judy picked the bedroom farthest from the front door and asked if we could put extra locks on her window. I bought the best locks I could find and installed a security system. The building had a doorman who checked everyone coming in. Judy said she liked that. We spent the first week unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. Judy wanted to paint her room light blue, So we went to the hardware store and picked out paint samples. We spent a whole Saturday afternoon painting together, getting more paint on ourselves than the walls. She laughed when I got a streak of blue in my hair. It was the first time I'd heard her really laugh in months. We started building routines that felt normal. We cooked dinner together most nights, trying new recipes from videos Judy found online. She was terrible at chopping vegetables, and I was terrible at following directions, but we made it work. We watched movies on the couch. Judy curled up next to me with a blanket. She started telling me about her day without me having to ask first. Small things, like what happened in history class or which of her friends said something funny at lunch. She smiled more often. Not all the time, but enough that I noticed. Her friend from middle school started texting her again, and soon Judy was making plans to hang out on weekends. She came home from those hangouts looking tired but happy. Martin's supervised visitation was scheduled for a Saturday morning at the Family Services Center. Judy didn't want to go. She sat on her bed that morning and told me she couldn't do it. I called Xavier, who said refusing could hurt our case even though the divorce was finalized. The supervisor would note Judy's cooperation or lack of it. Judy got dressed slowly, pulling on jeans and a hoodie. She barely spoke on the drive there. I waited in the parking lot watching the clock on my dashboard. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Judy came out looking pale and shaky. The supervisor walked her to my car and leaned in through the window. She said Martin had spent the entire visit trying to convince Judy that I misunderstood the journal entries. Judy had sat in silence for 30 minutes, then asked to leave. The supervisor made notes on her clipboard. She said forcing continued contact would be harmful to Judy's recovery. Judy buckled her seatbelt and stared out the window. I asked if she was okay. She said she never wanted to see him again. A week later, Judy was in her room for hours with her door closed. When she came out, she handed me several folded pages. She said she wrote a letter to Martin but wasn't going to send it. I asked if she wanted me to read it. She nodded. I sat on the couch and unfolded the pages. Her handwriting was neat and careful. She wrote that she knew she didn't ruin his life. She wrote that his choices were his own and she deserved better than what he gave her. She wrote that she was going to be okay without him. I folded the pages back up and hugged her. She said Cassandra told her writing it would help even if Martin never saw it. I put the letter in a folder in my desk drawer. Judy said maybe someday she'd want to look at it again or maybe she wouldn't. Either way was fine. 6 months after we left the house, Judy brought home her report card. She made the honor roll for the first time in 3 years. I put it on the fridge and took a picture to send to Lyra. Judy's teachers sent emails saying how engaged she seemed in class, how much more confident she was when answering questions. Judy told me she could finally concentrate. She said Martin's voice wasn't in her head anymore, the one that used to tell her she was worthless and stupid. She said it was quiet now. She could think her own thoughts without him interrupting. Her grades went up in every subject. She started staying after school for extra help in math, something she never would have done before. She joined the school newspaper and wrote an article about mental health resources for teenagers. Her teacher submitted it to a regional competition. One night while we were making pasta, Judy asked if I ever thought about dating again. I almost dropped the pot I was holding. I said I hadn't really considered it. She said she wanted me to be happy. She said I spent so many years taking care of her and dealing with Martin, and now it was time for me to do something for myself. I told her I was fine, but she gave me this look that said she didn't believe me. A few weeks later, I downloaded a dating app. It felt strange after 18 years with Martin. The first date I went on was awkward, and I came home early. Judy asked how it went, and I said the guy talked about himself the entire time. She laughed and said she'd help me vet anyone I brought home to make sure they weren't secretly terrible. I told her she had a deal. Judy started talking about college and what she wanted to study. She said she wanted to become a therapist someday. She wanted to help other kids who were being abused, kids who felt like she used to feel. She said if Cassandra hadn't believed her and helped her understand the abuse wasn't her fault, she might not have survived. I sat at the kitchen table and watched her talk about her future with this light in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. She looked up colleges with good psychology programs and made a spreadsheet ranking them. She asked if I thought she was smart enough to get in. I told her she was smart enough to do anything she wanted. Martin's lawyer sent a letter in the mail. Xavier called to tell me about it before I even opened the envelope. Martin wanted to reconcile. He claimed he completed therapy and understood what he did wrong. He wanted another chance. Xavier asked what I wanted to do. I said I wanted Judy to decide. I showed her the letter that night. She read it twice, then put it down on the table. She said she didn't believe him. She said people like Martin don't change just because they sit in a therapist's office for a few months. She said she didn't want any contact with him. Xavier sent a response through Martin's lawyer. He wrote that Judy was old enough to make that choice for herself, and her choice was no. Judy's 18th birthday fell on a Sunday. Lyra came over in the morning with balloons and a cake she made herself. A few of Judy's friends showed up in the afternoon. We ordered pizza and watched movies. Judy opened presents and smiled at each one. When it was time for cake, I lit the candles and we all sang. Judy closed her eyes and blew them out. Later, after everyone left, she helped me clean up the paper plates and cups. She said this was the first birthday she actually felt happy. She said she finally believed she deserved to exist and be loved. I hugged her and told her I loved her more than anything. A year after I found the journal, Judy and I were sitting in our living room looking at college brochures spread across the coffee table. She was talking about which schools had the best programs, which ones offered good financial aid. She looked different now. Her face had color in it. Her eyes were bright. She laughed easily. She talked about her future like it was something real and possible. I watched her circle schools on a map and realized we were genuinely okay. We were better than okay. We were thriving. Judy looked up and asked what I was thinking about. I said I was thinking about how proud I was of her. She said she was grateful I believed her and fought for her. I told her I would never stop fighting for her as long as I lived. She smiled and went back to her brochures. Outside the window, the sun was setting and the city lights were coming on. We had learned that protecting each other meant speaking up, setting boundaries, and refusing to accept cruelty disguised as family. We had learned that love wasn't supposed to hurt. Judy reached for another brochure and asked my opinion on a school in California. I leaned over to look at it with her, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were both exactly where we needed to be.